Good afternoon. I'm Digby Ricci and I welcome you to a continuation of our program of English enrichment. We continue our series of lectures on William Shakespeare, Brushing Up the Bard. And the following 3 lectures are going to be devoted to Shakespeare's often prescribed final text, the Tempest. The Tempest is frequently presented rather poignantly as Shakespeare's farewell to the cloud-capped towers of theatrical illusion and artistry. It is Shakespeare's last solo-authored play, and it was the first text to appear in the 1623 folio, the first collection of the complete works of Shakespeare. This tradition has continued in subsequent editions of the collected works. However, as Jonathan Bate and Eric Rasmussen, the editors of the Royal Shakespeare Company's complete works of Shakespeare, rather dryly point out, we cannot be sure whether the Tempest was given pride of place because the editors of the folio regarded it as a showpiece, the summation of the master's art, or for the more mundane reason that they had a clean copy in the clear hand of the scribe Ralph Crane, which could have given the compositors a relatively easy start as they set to work on the mammoth task of typesetting 1,000,000 words by Shakespeare. Whatever the truth of the matter may be, there is no doubt that this magnificent and complex work is regarded as a supreme blessing and a supreme challenge to interpreting scholars. It is, in a sense, both the first and the last. The narrative of the Tempest focuses on questions of government and power. What constitutes virtuous authority? The difficulty of reconciling humanity and power, goodness and authority, the ideal and the real. That difficulty is central to the text from the outset. However, before we examine the Tempest itself in more detail, it is important to glance at utopianism. And let us examine 3 utopian visions, visions of a golden age. One is from classical Greece, the other is Roman, and the other is from the Italian Renaissance. Hesiod, the ancient Greek writer who lived in the 8th century BC, writes in his Works and Days of the unity, beauty, and communication that occurred in an ideal age, the age of gold. When gods alike and mortals rose to birth, of many languaged men they lived of old. When Saturn reigned on earth, an age of gold. The immensely gifted Ovid, who lived from 43 BC to 18 AD, one of the glories of the Roman Augustan age, is an obvious influence on the ideal Commonwealth section of the Tempest. Ovid celebrates an unrestrictedly bounteous Eden-like world. He writes of the earth growing white with the heavy bearded wheat. Streams of milk and streams of sweet nectar flowed, and yellow honey was distilled from the verdant oak. In his Aminta of 1573, the Italian humanist Torquato Tasso is less concerned with flora and honey, but expresses a longing for the people of his age, contemporary humanity, to live as humankind did in an age of gold, before, as Tasso calls them, the dark conceits of power lust and warped honor marred human intercourse. Tasso writes very movingly, "Let us live, since the life of man has no truce with years. Let us love, for the sun sinks down and rises again, while its short light dies unto us once and for all, and sleep brings an eternal night." So it is important to note that dreams of utopia, a golden age, have always been part of the hopes and wishes of suffering humanity. whether we have Ovidian visions or whether we wipe away a furtive tear when we listen to Judy Garland singing of Somewhere Over the Rainbow in the classic MGM 1939 film of The Wizard of Oz, we all long for perfection on earth. Political social engineering, whether it be Hitlerian, Stalinist, Pol Potian or Favutian, turn such dreams into blood-soaked nightmares for humanity. And such nightmares have certainly been explored in many dystopian masterpieces, ranging from George Orwell's 1984 to Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, the title of course taken from Shakespeare's The Tempest. Yet we all strive and aspire, and in The Tempest, Shakespeare explores the efforts of humanity to achieve a better world through virtuous government and just authority. What makes for virtuous rule? How do fallible human beings justly govern other fallible human beings? These profound philosophical questions are central to The Tempest. Let's look at the text itself in more detail. During the spectacular tempest that opens the play, and state-of-the-art Elizabethan techniques would have been used to create this tempest, machinery, lighting, the lot. Conventional authority is overturned. The boatswain asserts that the roaring breakers have no regard for the authority of kings, and a number of very corrupt rulers are enraged by his words. They are, of course, Antonio, Prospero's usurping brother and Duke of Milan. They are Alonso, the King of Naples, who conspired with Antonio to overthrow Prospero. And they include Sebastian, Alonso's really evil and scheming brother. These men cling desperately to the undeserved authority that they possess, and they detest the inversion that is suggested by the boatswain's words. However, the virtuous Gonzalo, a genuinely compassionate man, realizes that in extreme circumstances, definitions have to be changed. Human authority needs to be altered. When humanity's survival is at stake, human beings must prepare to change. If we wish to achieve both happiness and a virtuous existence, we must govern ourselves in unexpected ways, particularly when we are presented with the terrifying challenges of nature and of fortune. So the necessity for human development and the willingness to change, both are stressed right from the beginning of The Tempest. And then we are introduced to Prospero, still an anguished exile, but also a powerful ruler of his own island. Prospero has educated his daughter Miranda in a manner that very few princes and princesses would have been offered at that time. And he is a man of extraordinary wisdom and compassionate love. He is devoted to Miranda. She is his dear one, and her love sustains him. Yet, for all Prospero's wisdom and capacity for love, he is, in a sense, trapped in the past, imprisoned in his angered and anguished and constant awareness of the injustices and cruelties that have been inflicted upon him. In a sense, what we would call today the back story of The Tempest is in no way a back story for Prospero. It is with him all the time. It is raw. And when he describes the past in lengthy speeches to his daughter Miranda, the reminiscences really take over, and he even becomes angered, snapping at her when he feels that she is not listening with sufficient awareness to the agonizing tale that he tells. And it is an agonizing tale. It is a tale of vicious betrayal and deception. Prospero denounces his perfidious brother, who exploited his role as trusted advisor, in a sense as subaltern, to Prospero's commander, in order to arouse disloyalty in those who were once loyal. Prospero uses images drawn from nature to underline the horror of this betrayal. His brother was the strangling, parasitic ivy that throttled the trunk of Prospero's virtuous, rightful rule. Prospero, as Duke of Milan, strove to be a wise sovereign, but Shakespeare is very aware of the dangers into which Prospero's intellectual commitments led him. How do you unite reclusive scholarship with a proper regard for the rights of the subjects that you govern? Prospero's dedication to the bettering of his mind led to his neglecting worldly ends, and ultimately Prospero's brother was able to ensure that Milan was condemned to degrade itself, to ignoble stooping before the power of Naples, and Prospero was toppled and exiled. Prospero's reminiscences, as I've already emphasized, cause him great agony, but his failures as well as his virtues emerge in his own account. The people of Milan loved him, so it was impossible for Antonio simply brazenly to murder his very popular brother. Prospero and Miranda were therefore cast into a rotten carcass of a ship, which Gonzalo kindly filled with the essential books for Prospero, and then were sent off to drift about until the storms and the sea destroyed them. The love of Miranda sustained Prospero during this traumatic and terrible time. And it is important to note that both great wisdom and intense affection are part of Prospero's nature. He is going to develop for the better. We feel this right from the start because bounteous fortune is now smiling upon him. Fortune has decreed that Prospero's enemies, those who betrayed him and overthrew him and usurped his position as Duke of Milan, are going to be in his power. The ship bearing them is approaching his island, and Prospero's magical powers can ensure that the ship is wrecked upon his island. So fortune plays a very important role. Fortune, of course, symbolized by the mysterious power of the sea, which brings the ship close to Prospero's island. However, human choice remains. As in so many of Shakespeare's plays, no characters are simply puppets of fortune. Characters make their own decisions. Prospero's enemies can be brought to him by a union of the acts of fortune and Prospero's magical powers. But what Prospero decides to do with his enemies is entirely up to him. Fortune presents us with challenges, and we must make the appropriate moral choices in response to those challenges. Prospero does have compensatory power on his own island, although it is hardly Milan, and he has absolute authority over two servant figures, Ariel and Caliban. Ultimately, Prospero will use his secret knowledge, the magical powers he possesses, to arouse a degree of repentance within Alonso, and also to regain his own dukedom and to arrange the marriage of his daughter Miranda to Ferdinand, Prince of Naples. However, Shakespeare emphasizes the fact that the development of Prospero, his transformation in a sense, must stem from the realization that genuine humanity and true wisdom do not lie in using learning and power simply for the sake of retaining earthly power. One must develop to the extent that one fully embraces human kindness. And I use the word kindness in its Elizabethan sense. It has a much wider meaning than simply niceness, generosity, the meaning that it has today. Kindness in Shakespeare's time means a full awareness of shared humanity. And this is what Prospero has to recognize by the end of the play. This, after all, is what, in altogether different context, Lady Macbeth means when she laments the fact that her complex, ambitious husband is too full of the milk of human kindness to take the quickest and most evil route to power. The milk of human kindness, the recognition that humanity is shared with all and that one must be aware of our rights and obligations to our fellow human beings. Now, Prospero's relationship with his servant Ariel is a very complex one. And Ariel, in fact, is an extraordinary creation, a creature of fire and air, passion and spirit, concord and mischief, loyal service and incipient rebellion. Initially, Ariel's flaming quality is emphasized in the text. Ariel creates the terrifying hallucinatory storm. He flamed amazement in every section of the king's ship and inspired a fever of the mad in the shipwrecked victims. However, it is Ariel's songs that comfort the grieving Ferdinand in ways that assist him to achieve happiness. The first song, "Come Unto These Yellow Sands," encourages a change of perspective and emphasizes the need to embrace joy. Come unto these yellow sands and then take hands and footed featly, ultimately unite in dance and joy. The second and very famous song is often quoted by writers as diverse as T.S. Eliot in his Wasteland and F. Scott Fitzgerald in The Great Gatsby. And this song is a deliberate deception on Ariel's part. Ferdinand's father is not dead. He does not lie full fathom 5 beneath the sea. However, the song focuses on death in a very different way. Death as a glorious and mysterious transformation. Flesh and bones can be transformed into treasures. Those are pearls that were his eyes. And therefore, despair is futile and needless in such a complex and mysterious world. Ariel's sweet airs allay Ferdinand's passions and cause him to be comforted and to explore other possibilities within existence. Jungian and Freudian critics are very fond of seeing both Ariel and Caliban as part of the human psyche, and there is much truth in their claims. Ariel, in a sense, is the embodiment of the creative human imagination. Such imagination is a form of empathy. It enables us to identify with the anguish and the joys of other human beings. If we can imagine properly, we can share. There is a wonderful aphorism by the great early romantic poet William Blake in which he declares a tear is an intellectual thing. Shared emotion can result in intellectual change and development. Imagination can transform thoughts and attitudes, and ultimately it is Ariel, the embodiment of the liberating creative power of imagination. Ariel, who will encourage Prospero to abandon his quest for vengeance and forgive those who have wronged him so deeply in the past. As I've stressed, Prospero's relationship with Ariel is very complex. He admires and even loves the quaint spirit, his dainty Ariel. But he also insists on complete control over Ariel, even threatening Ariel with torture and imprisonment if there are any signs of rebellion from the quaint spirit. Shakespeare is emphasizing here that humanity is both elevated by and troubled by the powers of imagination. Prospero liberates Ariel from the bonds of the earth, the earthy, abhorred commands of Sycorax, and Prospero's own commands cannot be regarded as a form of torture, for Ariel is able to use shape-changing powers and music to achieve Prospero's ends. Still, they remain Prospero's ends. Prospero controls the imagination, even if he does not brutally suppress it, as the witch Sycorax did. Sycorax subjugated the imagination. Prospero uses it. But the Tempest definitely suggests that Prospero's own self-development requires the imagination to be more fully released. Sycorax, the North African sorceress, is an invader of the island and a torturer. She has tormented Ariel brutally for over a decade. She is a force for enslavement and cruelty. Her magic is evil. Prospero's is questionable. Shakespeare's text explores the fact that in human existence there is power and power, authority and authority. Prospero's control of the island, his despotism, if you like, is enlightened in a manner that the power of Sycorax certainly was not. But that does not mean that Shakespeare endorses this power at all. Prospero is not perfect. The play is his journey to self-realization, to proper self-knowledge, and to an awareness of just government. Prospero has to change too, and the text certainly explores all the ways in which he does so. This would appear to be an appropriate moment at which to conclude our discussion of the Tempest for this first session. In the second session, I will examine the ideal Commonwealth debate and also the fascinating character of Caliban. Thank you for listening.